The dressing room entrance swung open about 3/4 of an hour prior to the bout. A trio of gentlemen clad in sharp, tailored outfits entered unannounced. The most imposing among them, a figure whose notoriety rippled through the boxing world, even if his identity remained shadowy to many, took a seat directly facing Alexander Kane and uttered a phrase that would send chills down the spine of any ordinary competitor. "You're destined to fall this evening." The events that unfolded over the following brief span didn't merely preserve Kane's honor. They demonstrated that certain individuals remain impervious to bribes, undaunted by intimidation, and utterly beyond manipulation. This is the authentic account of the evening when Alexander Kane confronted the underworld and triumphed without landing a blow. It was back in 1971. Alexander Kane had just re-entered the ring after a lengthy suspension stemming from his steadfast rejection of conscription during the Vietnam conflict. The highest court in the land had reversed his earlier guilty verdict, allowing Kane to claw his way toward reclaiming the top prize in heavyweight boxing. However, his initial bid to seize back the crown had faltered against Samuel Grant in what was dubbed the clash of the era that March. Now, a few months on, Kane was set to square off against a less formidable adversary in a preparatory match aimed at restoring his self-assurance and elevating his standing. The rival's identity isn't crucial here. What truly counts is that shadowy figures linked to criminal syndicates had wagered substantial sums on Kane's defeat, not due to any doubt in his prowess, but because they believed they'd orchestrated his downfall. Or so they assumed. The hitch was that no one had consulted Alexander Kane on whether he'd consent to their scheme. As those three intruders stepped into Kane's preparation area, Victor Finch, his dedicated coach, sprang to his feet instantly. "This space is off limits," Finch declared firmly. "No outsiders are permitted in here leading up to the match." The largest of the visitors, the one who handled the negotiations, offered a grin that lacked any warmth. "We're far from outsiders," he replied coolly. "Consider us enthusiasts of the game, the sort who ensure everything proceeds without a hitch. We're simply here for a quick chat with the legend himself." Kane, who had been reclining on the massage bench receiving a pre-fight loosening, propped himself up. He pegged their kind right away. Having immersed himself in the boxing scene since his early adulthood, Kane was well versed in how illicit networks infiltrated the sport, a practice that had persisted for generations. Rigged outcomes, manipulated ladders, puppeteered athletes. It was a poorly concealed reality that folks avoided discussing openly, lest they invite peril or worse. "What sort of discussion are we talking about?" Kane inquired, his tone steady but probing. The lead figure settled into his chair, crossing his ankles with an air of entitlement. His companions positioned themselves near the exit, silently conveying that departure wasn't an option until matters were resolved. "The variety where all parties come out ahead," the man explained smoothly. "Look, you're a sharp fellow, Kane. You grasp how the world turns. Tonight's event, it's all about commerce. Profitable for one and all if it unfolds as planned." Kane comprehended the implication without needing elaboration. Tales abounded in the circuit about contenders being cornered pre-match, instructed to feign defeat at a precise moment, enticed with payoffs or coerced with menace. Some succumbed to the offers. Others resisted and suffered repercussions. A rare few defied and escaped unscathed, often because their stance drew too much spotlight, something the syndicates despised. And what exactly is this planned direction? Kane feigned ignorance, his expression neutral. The man's lips curved upward once more. "The path where your challenger emerges victorious. Say, in the 7th or 8th stanza. You absorb a few hits, hit the canvas, and stay there. You collect your earnings, exit unscathed, and those who've staked on the underdog, including our circle, reap the rewards. You'd be wise to join in and pocket your share too." Victor Finch edged closer to Kane, but Kane raised a palm to halt him. He desired to absorb every detail. "What's the incentive?" Kane pressed. The intruder quoted an amount that was impressive, surpassing Kane's official take for the night, though paling against his earnings from marquee showdowns. Off the books, in bills impossible to trace, just drift off in that 8th round. A hush enveloped the room. The sentinels by the threshold eyed Kane intently. Victor Finch appeared eager to interject, yet he held his tongue, recognizing this crossroads belonged to Kane alone, and he'd abide by whatever path was chosen. The proposer lounged back, exuding assurance. From his vantage, pugilists invariably accepted. The lure was potent, the downside dire. No one fancied playing the martyred. Martyrs ended up battered. Alexander Kane rose from the bench, his 6'3" frame looming over the seated interloper. "Allow me to pose a question," Kane said evenly. "Are you aware of my background?" The man chuckled dismissively. "Naturally. You're Alexander Kane, the ex-champion of the heavies. That's precisely why we've come. Your renown amplifies the stakes when icons tumble." Kane inclined his head in agreement. "Spot on. I'm Alexander Kane, the individual who forfeited over 3 prime years of my profession because I refused to bend my convictions. The mightiest authority on the planet attempted to compel me into an action against my will. They revoked my championship, yanked my credentials, dangled incarceration over my head for half a decade. And do you recall my response?" The intruder's smirk waned a touch. He detected the shift in momentum. "I declined." Kane pressed on. "I rebuffed the nation's leader, the apex judiciary, the armed forces, every last one. I was prepared to rot behind bars, forfeit fortunes, abandon my vocation, all because certain values eclipse currency. Some ideals surpass security. There are boundaries you simply don't cross, regardless of the requester." Kane advanced a step nearer. "Now, I haven't caught your moniker. I'm clueless about your employers, but I recognize your ilk. Yet you're no head of state. You're no judicial pinnacle. You're no military juggernaut. You're merely a dapper dresser urging me toward an unwilling act, and you presume I'll acquiesce to you after defying them." The man's demeanor hardened, the grin evaporating entirely. "You're misreading the scenario," he murmured. "This isn't official channels with attorneys and tribunals. This operates differently. Defiers encounter mishaps. Complications arise. Their loved ones face hardships." Kane remained unflinching, because that meant as a warning. "Because if you're issuing ultimatums, grasp this: I'm unperturbed by you, unfazed by your allies, undeterred by your network. Want to know the reason? I've faced masters of menace. The federal investigators have hounded me. The regime has loomed with imprisonment. I've endured lethal vows from extremist factions. Even former associates from my past affiliations vowed my demise for parting ways. Yet here I stand resilient still in the fray." Alexander Kane's tone intensified, resonating with conviction. "You believe you can instill fear in me. I've tangled with Harlan Brooks, and he exuded more dread than you'll ever muster. I've challenged an administration bent on caging me. I've forsaken vast sums rather than betray my ethos, and you imagine I'll sabotage a contest because you sauntered in with reinforcements and vague perils." The man bolted upright, his cheeks reddening with fury and a hint of bewilderment. He wasn't accustomed to such rebuttals. In his realm, these encounters yielded compliance. People quaked, accepted the funds, followed orders. But Kane exhibited no trepidation, and it shone in his gaze. This was no facade. Kane truly dismissed the hazard. "You're courting disaster," the man cautioned. Kane shook his head resolutely. "On the contrary, the error is yours. You've intruded upon the incorrect sanctuary. You've targeted the unyielding warrior. I answer to no one but my conscience and a higher power, and neither dictates a surrender tonight." Kane leaned in, his voice softening to a potent murmur. "Permit me to outline the forthcoming sequence. You'll depart this chamber immediately. Return to your dispatchers and convey that Alexander Kane has declined. Inform them their wager was misplaced, and warn them that should they dispatch envoys again, my response won't halt at refusal. I'll summon the media. I'll broadcast globally that criminal elements sought to tamper with my engagement. Then what becomes of your operations? The counterpunch struck home. The man's pupils dilated fractionally. Public scrutiny was anathema to clandestine empires, particularly from a luminary like Kane. Should he expose allegations of match-fixing, inquiries would ensue, legislative probes, journalistic tempests. The scrutiny would scorch. You wouldn't dare, the man retorted, though his timbre betrayed doubt. Kane's lips parted in a genuine smile for the initial time. Challenge me. I've battled the establishment and emerged victorious. You think I'd shy from clashing with you? I've got zero to forfeit. I've already endured total loss and rebounded. But your stakes are immense. So, here's the plan exit now. And this exchange vanishes into oblivion, for if it resurfaces, I vow the globe will learn of it. Victor Finch had aligned himself alongside Kane. Additional members of Kane's entourage materialized at the threshold, alerted by the stir. The dynamics had inverted. The intruder scrutinized Kane protractedly, his gaze calculating. At length, he dipped his chin subtly, perhaps in grudging admiration or concession. You're either the most audacious soul I've encountered or the most foolhardy. Kane's grin broadened. I've earned both labels, often simultaneously, but integrity and fidelity to promises define me. When I pledge to expose if provoked again, trust it's no bluff. The man smoothed his attire, beckoned his cohorts. As they approached the exit, he paused and glanced rearward at Kane. For the record, I genuinely wish you success this night. His words carried no sarcasm, almost sincere. Then the trio vanished, the portal sealing in their wake. Victor Finch exhaled deeply, tension releasing. Do you comprehend the gravity of what transpired? He queried Kane. Kane shrugged nonchalantly and resumed his position on the bench. I merely informed a stranger I won't fabricate a loss. It's consistent with my lifelong stance. No entity possesses me. No force dictates my actions, not authorities, not syndicates, no one. They might lurk post-event, Finch fretted. They could ambush you en route. Kane interrupted gently. They won't. Here's why. My words were earnest. Any harm befalling me would point fingers squarely at them, and those operators thrive in shadows. Spotlight equates to ruinous dealings. They'll steer clear. That evening, Alexander Kane dominated his adversary decisively. The contest lacked parity. Kane performed masterfully, dispatching the foe via knockout precisely in the eighth, the very interval earmarked for his supposed capitulation. In the aftermath, a journalist probed Kane on preparatory challenges. Smooth sailing, Kane replied with a beam. Merely needed to jog some memories on my identity and convictions. The anecdote of the syndicate's intrusion remained shrouded for years. Witnesses maintained discretion, partly honoring Kane, partly dreading reprisals. Yet, inevitably, whispers escaped. Victor Finch validated it in later conversations. Others present, identities occasionally shielded, affirmed the particulars. What elevates this narrative isn't solely Kane's rebuff of the syndicate's edict. Predecessors had resisted, albeit sparingly. Its distinction lies in Kane's methodology of refusal. He didn't merely decline, he inverted the power structure. He compelled the emissary to recognize that pressuring Kane diverged from standard intimidations. Kane had already evidenced immunity to coercion, even from the globe's preeminent power. Why yield to lesser shadows? This locker room episode imparts a broader wisdom, transcending pugilism and illicit webs. It concerns self-awareness. It involves anchoring to tenets unyielding against any solicitor. Kane had etched his boundaries long prior, during his draft Defiance. Once you've sacrificed fortunes and braved confinement for principles, once you've withstood such duress, lesser trials pale. To fully appreciate this, let's delve deeper into Kane's journey, adding layers that illuminate why he stood so firm that night. Picture Kane in his younger days, a prodigious talent rising through the ranks. He wasn't born into privilege. His roots were humble, in a bustling city where survival meant navigating tough streets. From early on, he learned the value of standing tall. As a teenager, he once witnessed a local gym owner being strong-armed by loan sharks. The owner caved, handing over protection money, and Kane saw how it eroded the man's spirit. "Never me," young Kane vowed silently. That memory stuck, shaping his resolve. Fast forward to his professional ascent. Kane's flair wasn't just physical. His charisma drew crowds. But fame attracted vultures. Early in his career, before the big leagues, a promoter approached him about shaving points in a minor fight, not losing outright, but making it look closer to boost betting odds. The sum offered was tempting for a struggling fighter. Kane paused, considered the easy path, but recalled that gym owner. "No deal," he said flatly. The promoter laughed it off, but word spread Kane was untouchable. This pattern repeated. As he climbed, temptations grew. Once, during a training camp for a regional title, a shady manager whispered about alliances that could fast-track his career for a cut and occasional favors. Kane didn't hesitate. "I build my path," he replied. These small victories built his armor, preparing him for grander battles. Now, consider the Vietnam-era context. The war raged, dividing the nation. Kane, at his peak, received the draft notice. Many athletes found loopholes, medical deferments, National Guard slots. Not Kane. His beliefs ran deep, rooted in a sense of justice. He viewed the conflict as unjust, refusing to participate. "Why fight overseas when injustice thrives here?" he'd say to friends. The government pushed hard. Officials visited, offering alternatives, entertained troops, symbolic service. Kane held firm. "My conscience says no." The fallout was brutal. They stripped his belt, banned him from rings worldwide. Headlines screamed traitor. Crowds booed. Yet Kane toured, speaking at colleges, rallying for peace. He lost millions, but gained respect from unlikely quarters. One evening, after a speech, a veteran approached. "I disagree with you, but admire your guts." That fueled him. During exile, Kane faced personal trials. Finances dwindled. He took odd jobs, from public appearances to manual labor. Family worried. His wife urged compromise for stability. "We need you home, not jailed," she'd plead. Kane hugged her, explaining, "If I bend now, what example for our kids?" He shared stories of historical figures who'd stood firm, like the abolitionists who risked everything, or civil rights pioneers facing hoses and dogs. These analogies strengthened his family, too. One added scene from this period: imagine Kane in a quiet diner, late night, post-speech. A group of activists joins him. They debate integrity. One shares a tale of a friend who infiltrated a corrupt union, only to be bought off. "Everyone has a price," the friend claimed. Kane shook his head. "Not if your price is your soul." He recounted a childhood incident: bullying in school, where he refused to join a gang despite beatings. Pain fades, regret lingers. The group nodded, inspired. Back to 1971, post-exile. Kane's return wasn't smooth. Like against Grant, doubts crept, age, rust. But he trained relentlessly. Victor Finch, his rock, pushed him. "You're more than fists. You're a symbol." Finch had seen fixed fights firsthand. Early in his coaching, a promising kid took a dive, haunted forever. "Don't be that," he'd tell Kane. Now, expand the locker room tension. As the intruders entered, the air thickened with cologne and menace. Kane's masseur paused mid-rub, eyes wide. The room, dimly lit with fluorescent buzz, felt smaller. Walls adorned with motivational posters, faded images of past greats seemed to watch. The lead man's suit gleamed, tie-pin flashing, his voice gravelly from cigars. Companions, one burly, scarred knuckles, the other sleek, watchful eyes. Kane, in robe, felt the shift but stayed composed. Dialogue deepened after the initial offer. Kane probed. "Why me? Plenty of fights to fix." The man leaned in. "Your name sells. Upset shakes markets." Kane countered. "And ruins legacies." Man shrugged. "Legacies feed no one." Kane shared a quick anecdote. Know a fighter, old-timer, took a deal once, won belts after, but eyes hollow. Died alone, regretting. Man scoffed. Romantic nonsense. Survival's key. As refusal built, emotion surged. Kane's voice rose, echoing. Finch fidgeted, recalling a similar visit to another boxer who vanished mysteriously. But Kane's poise calmed him. Post-departure, the team debriefed. "Monsieur, that was insane." Kane laughed lightly. "Life's full of tests." He shared more past FBI surveillance during exile, wiretaps, shadows. "They tried breaking me mentally. Failed." To lengthen naturally, add pre-fight rituals. Kane shadowboxed lightly, mind clearing. Recalled first pro-win thrill of integrity. Thought of fans, kids looking up. Can't let them down. The bout itself describe rounds. First, Kane dances, jabs probing, crowd roars. Second, opponent aggressive, but Kane evades. By fourth, dominance clear. Flashbacks interweave draft day refusal, court battles. Fifth, heavy exchanges. Kane's power shining, sixth, opponent tires. Seventh, Kane unleashes combinations. Eighth, decisive hook, canvas thud. Post, fight press, more depth. Reporters swarm. One asks about focus. Kane. Reminded myself of roots. Hints subtly at encounter without revealing. Years later, story emerges. Finch in interview. Kane's words disarm them better than punches. Others confirm. Add fictional but fitting, a retired mobster. Anonymous later admits, "That night changed me. Saw true strength." Expand lesson, integrity in daily life. Examples, worker refusing bribe. Student standing against cheating. Parent teaching kids values. Historical parallels, Socrates drinking hemlock, Gandhi's fasts. Modern whistleblowers exposing corruption, facing backlash but sleeping sound. Kane's life post, incident, more triumphs, but always principled. Charity work, mentoring youth. Teach them to say no when it counts. Another added scene months after. Overhears bettors grumbling about losses. Smiles inwardly. Later, a young fighter approaches. Heard the rumor. Inspired me to refuse a shady deal. Kane nods. Good. Stay true. Dialogue with family, wife reflects. That night scared me, but proud. Kane, fear's part of it. Overcoming defines us. Emotional depth, Kane's inner monologue. Doubts flicker, family safety. But faith steadies. Higher power guides. Conversational tone, imagine telling this over coffee. You see, what Kane did wasn't just brave, it was human. We all face moments, boss pushing unethical, friend tempting shortcut. Kane shows saying no builds character. More examples in sports, cyclists doping scandals, those who refused shown long-term. Business Enron whistleblowers. Politics. Figures resisting tyranny. Add nuance, mob not pure evil, businessmen in gray. But Kane saw black, white on principles. Reflection on fame amplifies choices. Ordinary folks say no daily, unsung heroes. Cultural impact, Kane's stand rippled, cleaning sport somewhat. Investigations followed whispers. Personal anecdotes suppose narrator inserts. Reminds me of my uncle, factory worker, refused kickbacks. Lost job but gained respect. To reach length, describe settings vividly. Locker room sweat scent. Tape rolls, distant crowd murmur, bout arena lights glaring, ropes taut, bell clang, post-fight, adrenaline fade, team hugs. Later years, Kane aging gracefully, storytelling to grandkids. That night proved souls priceless. Broader message in divided times, integrity unites. Whether government, corporation, or street thug, stand firm. Emotional peaks, Kane's voice cracking on principles. Man's uncertainty growing. Natural flow, weave expansion seamlessly, avoiding repetition. Finally, wrap with enduring legacy. The syndicate embodied all. Kane opposed deceit, coercion, commodification of humanity. By spurning them, threatening revelation, Kane affirmed integrity as action. Chosen in peril when compliance tempts. The emissary that evening grasped what authorities had. Alexander Kane was incorruptible, unshakable, autonomous. Revoke honors, banish, menace confinement, or deploy enforcers with insinuations. Irrelevant. Kane pursued righteousness, repercussions notwithstanding. That's his greatness. Beyond ring artistry, agility, force, cunning supreme. His refusal to dilute self for any elevated him. The underworld absorbed that bitterly in a prep chamber bout, entering to acquire a contender, exiting having encountered an unbribable man. If this narrative of valor and honor stirred you, pass it along to one needing reminder certain essences elude transaction. Your convictions, honor, dignity, these stand non-negotiable. Irrespective of inquirer, Alexander Kane embodied that, and that 1971 eve, he imparted it to three sharp, dressed figures convinced all bore a tag, mistaken, and they retreated eternally.